Okay, it's 2 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Want to start off?
You're right.
Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first up, I'm assuming everyone's had the chance to read the minutes, go through them. If so, to the appropriate motion. Motion to move by legislator Holst, second by legislator House. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. And it's carried. First up, IT 1. This is the resolution authorizing the implementation of funding will cost 100% of the transportation project that may be eligible for federal aid or state aid, reimbursement from the Bridge New York. And Kurt, you want to talk on it?
Yeah, we put in a couple of bridges last year for Bridge New York again, and we were fortunate enough to get one. This bridge is located in the town of Parrish on our County Route 38, which crosses over the Little Salmon River. Unlike the paved New York culvert projects, bridges are covered 95% by the state. The one we got last year, which we're gonna do this year on 16, they consider that as a culvert. So culverts are 100% covered. Bridges are 95% covered. I just wanna make that clear, because I think I misspoke last year. So with that, we got 5% of $1.3 million to come up with to do the project, and I think it's good. It's a cheap bridge for us. It's in dire need because the bridge was there. I just found out. Somebody asked the question, I wasn't sure. That's 1910, that bridge was built. So we replaced.
Well, it's just right there. Right when you're going out, pretty, boom, right there.
Yes. It's an open deck.
Yeah.
Right next to Fuller's.
Right next to Fuller's building. So,
Okay.
Yeah. The good thing about it's all sitting on bedrock there, so.
Yeah.
Just some cases.
And it won't hold anything up because the next street over, Mill Street, has a bridge that we did 4 or 5 years ago, so that'll accompany all the traffic that usually goes that way.
Okay, look for a motion to move. First by legislator Holst, second by legislator Twist. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any questions?
No, I think it's great, and as many bridges as we can possibly cover. I just thought the wording was weird. I mean, we are guaranteed the funding, correct?
In the project that you fill out, paragraph 20, that's why it reads the way it does. It cost may be eligible, because if you don't follow all their guidelines in here, and they come back and do an audit, and they find out that we didn't follow the correct guidelines, you may be having to pay some of that money back if you didn't follow the guidelines. But it's pretty much a standard thing in every agreement that you need to follow the guidelines, otherwise they'll penalize you for it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
I was impressed, 1910.
Yeah, it actually has the original beams under it. We put a new decking on it probably 20 years ago. So,
Yeah, their money's worth out of that.
Yeah, I'd say so.
it's an old, back when they did all the stonework, all the buttons are little round stone.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting.
Okay.
We're not gonna put it back in little round stone.
Are they dry stack?
Well, there's mortar in between them. You can stick there, so.
Wow.
Okay, on to bid results. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, just one thing, I know that sewer line is right next to it.
Hanging.
Hanging, there, right.
It'll be there hopefully when we get
You-
done. We know that's in there, so that
Okay.
was part of the project. You have to list all the
Right,
utilities.
okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, it'd be a good one to keep words, yeah. Don't wanna be the guy to break that one. Okay, on to, bid results. Bid number 9130, furnished signposts and extensions. We had 4 bidders, only 2 responses. And this is recommended to go with the low bidder, which is Shimon Supply, at $67,185.82. First by legislator Twist, second by legislator Martino. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Bid number 005-19, signed blanks for the highway department. There was 5 people that bid, 5 responses. And on this one, this is showing the low bidder was Almac Sign at $43,189.77. First by legislator Holst, second by legislator Twist. And I always forget to look over here. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Bid number 004-19. Okay, that's the one I just did, isn't it? Okay, this is, traffic sign face material. We had 7 people solicited bids and only 4 responses. And on this one, it was recommended it only be the low bidder, which is Garden State Highway at $16,837.40. All those in, I'm sorry. First by legislator Markwood, second by legislator Holst. Any questions? Sorry, Linda.
That's all right.
Just put her down for all.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. And on to bid 006-19, structural steel for the Oswego County Highway Department. We have 3 bids solicited, 2 responses, and one of the 2 did not bid all the items in question. Therefore, the correct bid, the low bidder would be Shimon Supply at $469,375.24.
Chairman, actually, they're recommending to split the bid. That the, steel sales, it's in the end of the report, that steel sales will get the items numbered there, and Shimon would get the other items, so. We went from, that way we're getting a little bit from each
I
buyer.
don't understand, I didn't see how that was, didn't see how it was worded. Oh, I got you. It was, looking for a motion to award the split bid between Steel Sales Incorporated and Shimon Supply. First by legislator Lockwood, second by legislator Twist. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, carries. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Kurt. Now, on to, I'm not used to this new format. Okay. We had something.
Take the quarter budget quote, please.
What's that, we're on the quarter budget? Cool. Is it in- Okay, I got you. I went straight line last time, we had to jump in. Okay, in front of you, everyone has had the opportunity to review the quarter midget club, lease, which we're all familiar with. There were some issues in the past regarding the fencing, some things to keep us compliant with our FAA and keep everything up with the grants. We had a chance to meet with, Mr. Haynes, we went through everything, and if, everyone's good with the lease here. I know Richie, I don't know if you wanted to say anything else.
We'll draw a final lease, once the committee's acted on it, the club had sent, their suggestions regarding temporary fencing and the deadline for the permanent fencing, and, I believe you wanna run a new lease, not run this retroactive to the expiration of the old lease.
That's correct.
Okay.
The reason being at the expiration of the last lease, we had put a lock on the gate in case we didn't go further with it, and we weren't sure if anyone got in there and whatnot, and for liability reasons.
We'll start the lease as of the date.
Therefore, we'll start the lease, so we won't be charging the
Yes.
club the prorated rate. Okay, if everyone's, good for that, look for a motion to. First by legislator Twist, second by legislator Holst. Any questions? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Carries. Onward. Film production bills. Anything you want to say on this?
The superintendent of buildings and grounds received this request from a local screenwriter after who is developing a television pilot and seeking permission to film part of the pilot at the Flashback Courthouse. I think they need to use this, they're asking to use the stairs and lobby area. I don't think they're looking at the courtroom. Since this doesn't violate anything, but I think that if the county attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, since this would be a commercial use of a public building, you can't do it for free, you have to charge them something. Is that correct, Rich?
Yeah, that would be correct.
Understand.
And their request, they give the dates and the times that they would need this. I think they're gonna do it on the weekend, so it would not interfere with court or some of our operations.
And the rate that we're considering is what, just whoever has to be there with them, cover their salary.
Whatever, John, what would you say?
Yeah, probably about $200 to cover the salary on that for the day. I'm already, gonna be in Pulaski on March 23rd to go for this initial walk.
Oh, so you'll do it for free.
I'm doing that one for free because I'm up there on another project. I'm on Pulaski fishing. But then the Saturday, June 8th would be the one where you have a person being paid there as well, so.
So I understand you're gonna write up some sort of agreement and have Richie take a look at it. Okay, so we're looking to, for a motion to enter into an agreement with these people for the sum of $200. First by legislator Martino, second by legislator Holst.
I do have a question. And the thing that they make, do they have to say that they were at the, you know,
You want
last
that into
visit?
agreement, not film credit, yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I was just curious, it is a historic site in Oswego County, so I was just kind of curious.
That'd be
I think it
important.
would be good.
I think it would be important, particularly if it's hooked up to the regular street.
Yeah.
You might wanna see the production first.
Excellent point.
They're using other sites in Pulaski as well, like the Pulaski Library and a few other areas too, so I imagine they have to credit and, since it is being filmed entirely in Pulaski, I don't recognize the village.
Cool.
I'm sure John would something in the agreement.
Want to be a committee member named Oswego or you?
No.
Just Marie Shaw.
Right. Understand, any more questions?
Anybody want to be an extra?
Yeah.
Saturday.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Just making a note, I saw Dave raise his hand.
Carried.
Okay.
He wants to be next.
Yeah. Okay. On to facilities and technology, 5-year plan.
Just submitted, updated the 5-year plan for facilities and technology division. Any questions? Can we answer right now on it?
Anyone have any questions for Dan? Okay, let's go, the capital project update. Okay. We covered that and everything on the.
Not working.
Understand, on to advisory boards, the soil and water, and all that scores.
Sure.
I can introduce.
Oh, yeah, that was good. I'm still looking forward to it.
Okay. We have here today Joe Chevrolet, who's the director of Oswego County Soil and Water. And at the end of last year, he came into the Economic Development Planning Committee and gave them a presentation on the impact of the emerald ash borer invasive species coming into Oswego County. And the committee at that time recommended that he do the same presentation for this committee as it involves trees along roadways and highways and our highway department.
Thanks,
Go ahead, Joe.
So this is, we'll just going to go over this one invasive species, and it's really it's a forestry issue, but it becomes certainly when this impacts trees and certainly along roadways, trails, and along around county assets, it certainly becomes a liability and safety issue. So that's why I'm here today just to present this to you. So I'll go through a little bit of background first on the emerald ash borer. It's a beetle, an insect from Asia, and it came into this country. It was found in 2002 in Michigan, out in the Midwest, and it was found in Western New York in 2009. And when it was found there, it was determined that it actually had been present for about 8 years prior to that. So this probably has actually been in the country since the mid-90s, and was just discovered, and it has really blown up as far as its distribution and where it is currently. It came in first into the country in hardwood packing materials, which is how a lot of these insects enter this country. So in 2017, it was confirmed in this county, in the southern part in Phoenix, and it was also confirmed in the northern part in 2018. Along with 2017, it was actually found in West Monroe area too. So it pretty much forms a triangle. For the most part, I'm sure it is. It maybe in small locations or in a small way in between. It just hasn't been found yet. So like I said, these have been here a while before they're actually found. It needs to build up to a certain population before it really impacts an area. So the long story short is that it infests and kills all ash trees. We primarily have white and green here. We do have black, but the main ones that will be an issue are the white and green ash. So you'll see that certainly killing trees at some point in a big way. So emerald ash borer distribution in the country itself, you can see it really started in the Midwest, worked its way our way, and you can see it's definitely here to stay. Each one of those just defines a county that each red dot that is infested. So it's here, certainly here to stay. So you can see in New York, these are each green diamond is a location that it's currently at. For some reason, this is a little bit older map, so in the newer ones, I haven't seen those actually on there yet. For some reason, Oswego County was kind of left out of that, but it is definitely here. It's been confirmed by the DEC that there should be a diamond in the northern part of the county, as well as on the southern part as well.
What do you mean by restricted zone? Because they can go anywhere they want.
Right. So this is actually an ash quarantine, and this had to do with restriction of movement of ash products rather than the buck itself, obviously. So as far as emerald ash borer identification, it's a little green insect, has a little bit of an orangish purple abdomen when it flies, very emerald green. But it's only about a half inch long. There's a lot of photos where it's on basically on the head of a penny, very small insect, and then you have on the left side the larva, and that's the part that actually really kills the tree. For years, we've gone and looked at either trees that potentially could have emerald ash borer in this county, or insects that potentially could be. And almost every time someone has called up until recently, it has been this beetle that seems to be the look-alike, and that's when somebody said they've been here for 20 or 30 years. I'm almost positive that's what they've been seeing, because it really is pretty new to this area. So a little about the life cycle. On the upper left, you can see the eggs of the emerald ash borer that are laid on the tree. Those hatch into the larva. Okay. On the right-hand side, you'll see the larva, and they crawl around in between the bark and the wood of the tree. It's called the cambium layer, and that's the principal living part of the tree. It divides, goes one way, becomes wood, divides and goes the other way, becomes bark to protect the tree. But underneath that, that's essentially when you've heard of someone girdling a tree or they cut just the outer edge with a chainsaw. That's what that insect does, and it leaves these what are called larval galleries, and it crawls around and eats that. And when it builds up to sufficient numbers, it can certainly kill, and it basically girdles the tree. When they form an adult, you see in the lower right-hand corner, basically the top of the insect is flat, the chin is kind of cupped. When it comes out, it forms this perfect D-shaped hole. So that's quite a diagnostic feature. If you can find that, you pretty much have emerald ash borer. If you're looking at it, make sure you're looking at an ash tree, obviously. And then the insects feed on the leaves and do the cycle, continue that all over. So here's these are, the one on the left is actually a picture from a tree right in Phoenix. So we know it's definitely here. If you look at that, you can actually see these little S-shaped, what are called galleries. That's the tunnels that the larvae form. When they're an S-shape, that's a pretty diagnostic feature that you're dealing with emerald ash borer. And then on the right, you can see the D-shaped hole. And here's what you see from a distance. These are actually the same trees. These are in Phoenix. You can see some dieback in the foliage part of the crown part of the tree. And you can't really see it there as well, but what really clues somebody into whether or not it has that is, let me go to the next slide. I think you can see it a little bit better. It's what's called blonding. And if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a tree there, and you'll see this blonde patch. The ash by nature has an ashy gray bark. Underneath it is a blondish bark. So when you chip off the gray part, becomes blonde. So that stands out. What that's from is from woodpeckers. There's increased woodpecker activity when you have these because they eat the larva. And on the left, you can actually see numerous woodpecker activity, and then on the bottom center of the screen, you can see a little gallery, and that's actually all that clued us into to having the DC come and peel the tree and confirm this, is that we saw that little S-shaped gallery, and that was that we knew we certainly had that. So these are just some other symptoms that you can have, some increased sprouting on the tree, and you can see a little bit of woodpecker activity, dieback of the foliage. And this I'll skip over. One thing we make sure, obviously, when we're looking at trees, if anyone calls, that we do have an ash tree, but I'll skip that for the sake of time. And this is just distribution of ash. You can see that, look at our county, we certainly have that. There's a little more to the western and southern part of the county than there is maybe to the eastern, but it's certainly, certainly here. Just some miscellaneous information. The ash borer on its own moves like about 1 to 2 miles per year. We can move it though, 10 miles, 50 miles by moving firewood. So what happens is those larvae that I showed you earlier, they're stored in the wood. They overwinter that way, and then they pop out in the spring. So if you take an infested tree from here, went to the Adirondacks, that could pop out and potentially, infect that area if it, wasn't already present. And that's the reason why you look around campgrounds and you see "Don't Move Firewood" campaigns. So that's a really big reason for that. And then, like as I said earlier, it may be present for several years before detected. So you could literally look at a tree that actually has it, and because it starts in the top of the tree, works its way down, you may not see that little D-shaped hole, and you may not see those little galleries. Could be in it for a while until you build up really large populations of emerald ash borer. And it can kill a tree in 1 to 2 years. And when they come down, ash tend to fall in very large pieces, which is where the liability and the safety issue comes in. EAV impacts are, obviously there's the, ecological, environmental, but I think the big ones why I'm here with this committee is the public safety, legal liability, and there's some, economic, along with just increased costs of having to take dead trees down, in a numerous, with a lot of trees all at once. So with that said, here's just, just to just to show you the impacts, here's a street and from the Midwest area. Nice, vigorously growing ash trees. On the right side, they're all dead. So there's your liability and legal concerns. This is not. I'll show you a little more of what this county could be looking at. This would be in a village that could potentially be an issue. City setting and things like that. This is a little bit different, but just to show you the drastic nature of some of the impacts. And this is a little closer. This is right in Rochester, ash-lined street, and no more ash trees on the right side. So pretty big impact, and that's obviously where you have high populations of ash trees. It can be quite drastic. This is actually along the thruway, right in between Syracuse and Rochester. If you get out that way, certainly next spring or summer when the leaves are supposed to be on, it's extremely easy to pick out the ash trees because they're just all dead. And that was actually found out in Rochester maybe about 6 to 7 years ago, and they are starting to, from what I understand, starting to have some trees fail. So that's probably the time period. Once it's found in a pretty decent sized population, that's kind of maybe the time frame. But certainly once you start having dead trees, there's they're an issue and a concern without a doubt. So with that said, this has certainly has a municipal impact on the county and all other villages, cities, and towns in the county. So it can have an impact. So what I'd like to talk about now is just the planning aspect. How can you prepare for the impacts of this insect? Now, some of the things I've looked at other counties that have prepared for this. You take, for instance, Onondaga County. They have a lot of a huge holding of county parks and things of that nature. So they probably went about this certainly in a different way. Perhaps they looked at their county roads, all the county parks and things like that. And in the park setting, maybe we have a smaller holding, but we do have a pretty extensive network of county roads and also the county recreational trail, which is about 26 miles long. So certainly a lot of areas where you should at least start the conversation about, is there something that could be done or should be done. So just some suggestions is you can determine a core group to make decisions. This committee is one and why I'm here. And then you want to determine your assets and potential impacts. So we kind of just went over some of those. I'll go over them again. Another option is to kind of continue with a plan is to figure out how many ash trees you have, and that's sort of the picture on the right. That's from another setting. That's the village of Sandy Creek that we did some inventory for them. It would be a little bit different with county roads, not the nice sidewalks to walk up and down, but it is a good idea to at least get an idea of what you're working with. There's some high areas of high concern, perhaps, because there will be areas where there's miles of no ash trees, and there will be areas where there's probably 100 and in less than a mile or something like that. So that very well could be the issue, and you won't know until you obviously take a look at that. And then you really could have should have some sort of a plan, or at least like I said, I think starting a conversation and discussion. But a plan could be helpful. You can be both proactive and reactive. Proactive would mean to start looking at all the, at the ash trees, potentially even cutting them before they're infected in places where it could be a big concern. And obviously the reactive efforts would be cutting after they're dead or after they're already infested at least. And then, determine who will be, implementing that. And obviously implementation would be the last one. So the potential impacts for this county would be the county rights of way. We did just a quick windshield survey. We did another staff person and I from Soil and Water took a look at Route 6 from Route 3 all the way to 104, and we went up and down both sides. We counted somewhere in between 250 and 300 ash trees in 10 miles. So, and I don't think that can be really extrapolated to come up with a number for the remaining almost 500 miles of roads. But it just gives you an idea. That's a pretty extensive amount of trees, and they were anywhere from 4 inches to probably more than 20 in diameter. So that can certainly be be a big deal, as you do have most of the roads here. Is that 29.5 is the right of way?
25 feet, 24 inch, 24.9 is the right to the number, but we go 25 feet.
Okay, all right. So it can, you can certainly have quite a few trees in that. The other areas would be the county recreation trail, the 26 miles, and that can have as I understand, much even in the larger right of way than that. Other trails, parks, Camp Hollis could be an issue in some of those places. And I've had some conversations with Youth Bureau as well. Even just trees that are around the cabins, that can be a liability. And it's not, it's not necessarily there yet, but this is the conversation you need to have a few years before it's a big problem, because there is, certain planning and like, as I said, one option is an inventory. And then other municipalities with the same assets, that's the impacts within this county. As you see here, just just a couple of shots of the one on the left is the recreational trail, and it's a little tough to see, but there's actually an ash tree right there that's right on the trail. So at some point when that does become infected, certainly the chance of that falling, onto that trail. And then there's the same on the road. I just took a random shot of Google Earth, County Route 7, and that's certainly pretty heavy to ash in that area. So just to show you what the potential impacts could be. And so your management options are, you can certainly do nothing, let the trees, die, fall as they will, kind of thing. You can treat every tree with ash tree. There is a certain insecticide that can work on them. That is, as far as right-of-ways, that's just really not an option. It's extremely expensive. That's more for if you have some certain, historical tree or some tree that serves a great purpose. You could save a handful, or even take a village, for instance, if they have, a couple dozen trees, they may choose to save those rather than take those down. And it can work before they're infested, and then obviously you can cut every tree, being proactive before the insect is there, or being reactive, and then a combination of the approaches. Which you may have a few trees that could be saved with that, but the rest of them, it's potentially cutting them down and in places you could replant, but for the most part on right-of-ways you won't likely be able to, just because of the nature of them, obviously. And just some of the efforts that we've had on our part is just some outreach. We've done, a couple of these presentations. We just did one last year to the Association of Town Supervisors, and that went very well. Lots of interest. We really haven't had anyone reach out to us to help planning or anything of that sort, but certainly just letting them know that this has the potential to be quite an issue. And we've actually conducted street tree inventories for 6 of the villages in the county. Ash was not as big of an issue for most of them. There's a handful, maybe Phoenix did have a handful of ash trees, so they'll have to certainly deal with those, and they're welcome to call us with questions. And then inspection of potential emerald ash borer finds, we'll still do that to see if it's moving to new areas. Forest management advice to landowners, a lot of that just incorporating what we already do, incorporating ash harvesting into our reforestation management. Have started some of that in the areas where it could be a concern, and then we're definitely available to the county to assist with planning efforts, and inventory as well. It's something that we could certainly do if that was of interest. We have the ability to get interns on board, things of that nature. So if it were were of interest to the county, we could definitely help with that. But and definitely with the planning efforts. So. With that said, just a quick summary. You just have to, kind of everything we just went over. Determine a core group that will make the decisions. Determine what level of planning effort you'd like to see, and then how many ash trees do you have? I think that's a big one. Where are they located? And determine your management strategy. And that's all I have. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Wow.
Great.
Yep, sure.
How expensive, like for specimen trees, or is this going to go by way of the American elm tree?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it's comparable to that chestnut. The way they see it is that essentially the population builds up kind of follows a common curve, but we'll play, at some point we'll plateau. They say there's sometimes a crash, and then you can start seeing a few ash trees back. But I really don't know. I mean, that's a lot of crystal ball type determinations. I really don't know how long.
Are the
that would
insecticide
take.
treatments expensive?
They are. It's somewhere around $9 to $12 per inch of diameter. So, 20-inch tree could be $200 every 3 years. The idea is once it's really close, you get to a point that, and these aren't trees that you do on a right of way or 1,000 trees or anything like that. You pick some large tree that might cost $5,000 to remove in a backyard or something like that, or public library, anything like that. Those are the types that it's really not fitting for.
Do they inject it?
They do.
At the root base or into the tree?
It's drilled right into the tree.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's necessary every 3 years. So.
What valuable is the lumber?
It just depends. I mean,
ash goes back and forth like any hardwood, but is it worth taking some of them down and sell them and recoup something?
it can be. It just depends on. A lot of times you get these right-of-way trees, and they're pretty. They have a lot of limbs and things of that nature, which would pretty much make them firewood. But you can. And it's not to say that you won't have logs out of some of them. You can, and ash is at this point it is valuable. It's comparable. It's probably just under cherry at this point. Which that's down from what it used to be, but it's still.
Are the logs still saleable after the bugs get in them?
They can be. I guess it depends on. It depends on how if it just got the bug. That's one thing. But if it's a dead tree, then obviously that would be firewood after it's dead.
So you're not supposed to transfer it anywhere where it's not already, right?
Correct.
Because then you're spreading the
Correct.
bug.
Yeah, and there's flight seasons and things of that nature to avoid. Obviously, you don't want to be trucking logs in the summer. There's other quarantines that have to do with the state level too.
So they're still in the dead tree, right?
Correct. Well,
So if you have a program that you take these trees down,
Mhm.
and you don't want these bugs to spread, what do you do with those trees?
There's a limit on basically chipping in. It's got to be under 1 inch in every diameter, and that can that can basically get rid
So
of
that
it.
eliminates the bug if you chip it down.
Yeah.
I'm just curious because if you start cutting trees and you got them piled up,
Right.
You got to do something with them, otherwise you're going to have the same.
Exactly. I mean, basically, once you have it, it's here, and you wouldn't want to, if say you took some wood from Phoenix and you didn't have it in Redfield, you obviously don't want to go up there with it, that kind of thing. But once you have it, I mean, you have to transport them and things like that. So, but there's other restrictions. So, I mean, obviously, if you put together whatever a group, or you want some information from me, I can give you more specifics, because there are other restrictions, but it probably wouldn't apply here. I mean, I think it's under you're not allowed to move firewood more than 50 miles, things like that. So.
Sounds like we need to increase the woodpecker population.
I do think that, to go to your question, I do think that the county trail, as far as selling logs, would be a lot better than roadside, because roadside, most of the time they won't take them because they're full of hardware.
Mhm.
But you got that 26 miles of, you might end up with somebody down the posted sign here and there, but that right of way goes anywhere from, I think it's 60 feet to 280 feet, depending on where you're at, so there could be a potential there too.
Yeah, for proactively taking them down,
Yeah.
and potentially where some could offset it, even if it's 10-20% of the cost.
Thank you.
All set. Well, thank you very much for coming and sharing that information.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, now we are looking into going to executive session for discussing the litigation with Mexico, and also we need to discuss some sand issues with the house.
And also we have proposed pending litigation regarding a personal injury motor vehicle accident.
Exactly, what Richard said. Okay, for a first by legislator Twist, second by legislator Holt. All those in favor?
Aye.